Okay, welcome to our junior preview PhD student panel. Right now we have 4 PhD students in the Computer and Information Science and Engineering Department at the University of Florida who are going to answer questions about the entire PhD process. So feel free, if you're watching this live, to drop questions in the chat for you to answer. For people who are in the current Zoom, you can also put questions in the chat. So I will go ahead and introduce our panelists. So I'll ask you to introduce yourself, but briefly we have Aisha Aloba, Jennifer Kramer, Neha Rani, and Isaac Wang. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves in the order that you are on the screen from left to right.
Okay, so I can go fast. Hi everyone, my name is Aisha. I'm a 5th year PhD student at the University of Florida, and my research areas are all body gesture recognition, child-computer interaction, human-computer interaction, and my advisor is Dr. Lisa Anthony. I work in the INIT lab.
Hi, and Jennifer Kramer. Most people go by Furby for me. I'm a 3rd year PhD student. My advisor is Dr. Jorg Peters, and I work on computer graphics and mesh generation, medical reconstruction, and most recently, the project we're working on involves 3D interactions in VR.
Hi, I'm Neha, and I'm a 3rd year PhD student here at youve. I'm a researcher at ELX Lab, that stands for Embodied Learning and Experience Lab. And my advisor is Dr. Sharon Lin Chu. And my research area is wearables for education, embodied learning experience, context awareness in educational systems. Yeah, that's all.
All right, I'm Isaac. I'm a 5th year PhD student. I work with Dr. Jamie Rees as part of the Rees Lab, and my research focuses mostly on gesture recognition and how we can create computers that can communicate non-verbally as well as verbally.
So for the students that are on here, if you have any questions, or for those that are watching on YouTube, if you have any questions for the current PhD students, feel free. Okay, I do have a question for the students. What are the 1 or 2 biggest differences between undergrad and grad school?
I'll just start, and I feel the biggest difference that I find between undergrad and grad is, like, while being an undergrad, your focus is entirely on your courses or the project related to the courses. But when you become grad student, there is a lot of other things that come into play as well, like your research, especially if you're a grad student and involved in research. If you're a PhD student, you're definitely involved in research, and you have several other university-related events that you're organizing, your lab works that you're doing, your research work, and your courses. So it's a lot more a combination of a lot more extra work that you will definitely have to manage time for and work for. Yeah.
I can kind of build off of that. So part of, I think the biggest difference I found was the way courses were structured to kind of accommodate the focus that we have on doing research. So I found like a lot less of like the micromanaging type of assignment structure that you get in undergrad classes. And the grad level courses, the lectures are very much structured on the material, and you'll probably like have a handful of assignments throughout the year. And usually at the end, like if there's a large project that the course finishes with, half the time they offer the opportunity to just bring the course material into your current research project. So there's simultaneously much less time to yourself and also a lot more time, because they want to give you that time to do your research and kind of build on what you're learning, so you're expected to get more out of it rather than just go to class and then leave and be done.
Yeah, I guess kind of to add to that, it's like the main difference is how undergrad is really structured, right? You have these set classes, and you go, you do your homework, and you're done, right? You take the test, whatever. Grad school, it's a lot less structured. As kind of these other points, right? They give you the time, and they give you kind of the goals that you have to work to, and it's kind of up to you to work with your advisor, your lab, to figure out, okay, what paths do we need to take? What things do I need to do personally in order to reach those goals?
Yeah, I think everybody has said what I had in mind is like the independence. Like as a grad student, like there's no one who is really gonna chase you around to like do anything. Like it's all up to you. If you have to be self-motivated to like set your priorities right, time management, and like try to like get everything done on time. Else, like there's no one really like pursuing you in most of the classes. Most of the classes are like project-based classes. So you have to like manage your time right and try to like do your assignments while managing your research, teaching assistant duties if you're a teaching assistant, and mentoring duties if you're mentoring undergrad. So like there's a lot of those processes that you have to make time for everything while making sure you're also on track towards like if you're a PhD student graduating on time, because that is also part of the process. So yeah.
Aisha, that's great. Thank you. So that goes into the next question, which is, how do you manage your time between research, teaching, and classes?
Okay, so for me, I think it's so like I said, it's like a priority thing. So like managing your time, I feel like for me depends on like what is going on at a particular time. So for example, there are times when I have conference deadlines, and at that point, like my research is top. Like if I have conference deadlines, like I would spend maybe a little bit less time on like the teaching assistant duties. I may like send a message to my professor that like, oh, this is coming up. I may not be able to spend the number of hours I need this week, but I will make it up maybe in 2 weeks' time when my research duties have come a bit down. And then if I finish the conference deadline and like I know like I have to grade a lot of work, then I could maybe send a message to my advisor and be like, oh, I can't really get stuff done this week, like, but I'm gonna make it up. So it's just, I always try to balance kind of like a lot of things are like higher priority sometimes, and things are like equal priority some other times, but it's just like trying to make sure that everything is on track. So if you can't get something done this week, you need to make sure you can keep track next week. So like sometimes like people like have calendars or like to-do lists to kind of just keep themselves on track. So some people are more structured and organized. Some other people are not structured and organized. Some people procrastinate more than others. So it's just knowing yourself. Like grad school is really about knowing yourself. Like no one path is for everybody. Like everybody has to figure out who they are. So that's the nice part about the grad school, is you get to know who you are better, and then you can use that to decide on like how to balance things.
Thank you. That was great advice. Isaac?
Yeah, wow, Aisha, I think you pretty much nailed everything. I do want to add one kind of bit of advice that I learned my first year, and it's been invaluable. Right, in grad school, you're constantly juggling a lot of balls, right, between research, teaching, and classes. It's okay to drop the ball or even pick one up and put it down, right? Nothing is strictly set, so you don't have to be juggling everything at once. If it's too much, right, talk to someone, talk with your advisor, talk with your professors. Again, as Aisha mentioned, most likely you'll be able to make arrangements and pick it up later. So it really is a marathon, not a sprint, as I'm sure y'all have heard.
I'm still actually learning that one. The one I find kind of like what Aisha was saying was the communication is key. I have found I'm one of those people that used to be very unstructured and went very structured this past year. Lots of calendars, lots of to-dos. If it doesn't get written down, it doesn't get done. But just like really be aware of your deadlines and communicate to the people that are overseeing you, be that your mentor, your advisor, the professor you're working with for teaching. Let them know, I've got this deadline I'm working for over here. So a lot of my focus is going to go that way. Is there anything we can do to kind of shift responsibilities around? But actually, to pull back from what we were talking about earlier, as far as all that time we spend mentoring in grad school compared to undergrad, is the undergrads that you're mentoring at that time, you can, it's kind of sound a little weird, but you can use to your advantage and they'll thank you for it. If you're too busy to directly work on something, but you can break it down into tasks that will help them get a better experience within the lab, that's what they're there for. They want to learn, they want that opportunity. So if you can at least stay on top of mentoring them, but give them a little bit more freedom, that can also kind of help you like put the ball down and not constantly be like looking at waiting for it to like roll off the edge of a table. Like there's other people that you're working with to help them improve so that they can also help you improve as well.
Thank you, Jennifer. We have a question from Harris. He wants to know if you've received funding for grad school, talk about how you received it and what type of funding did you receive? Because I know everyone is different.
So when I got admitted into grad school, I was admitted into the PhD program. So the PhD program itself usually has, when you get accepted, has the about a year of graduate assistantship job, which can be which is teaching assistants most of the times, because in the beginning sometimes you have advisor, sometimes you don't. So when you don't have advisor, you definitely have a TA job. But when you have an advisor, you can talk to your advisor. Sometimes advisors fund you directly through their research funding. And if that's not the case, you can always reach out to other professors who's not even your advisor, if you have that communication with your own advisor to fund you to work on projects that have funding. That gives one funding in one way, and other common way for graduate students to get funded is through TA-ship, and it usually covers your it has a scholarship with your tuition fees as well, and you get the TA-ship stipend as well.
So mine is similar to Nea. Like when I came in with like, as at that time they had like a first year scholarship where you be a TA, but along the way you can then switch to an RA, but it was just for 1 year. I don't know how it works now. So I did that for like the first semester. Then I joined a lab, and then from there on, my advisor sponsored me as like a full research assistant for some years. And then now I juggle between like being a teaching assistant and a research assistant. So yeah.
Yeah, I came in with the first year of teaching assistantship. Since I did my undergrad at UF, I came in already having my advisor, but I was already like getting on a roll with doing a teaching assistantship with operating systems. So I kept working on that over the year. So I just kind of kept going with the teaching assistantship, even though it wasn't the set like 1 year thing. You can still continue to apply for it and use it. So that's the way I've been funding it.
Yeah, on top of that, I'll add that there's always an option for teaching assistantship. So you have to apply in time. Even like, as most of us have said, like when we join the program, we have like a year of assured graduate assistantship, but after a year you have to apply through a forum, through a website that we have. You can apply for TA-ship, and that's only the case when you talk with the advisor and you know that you're not getting research funding. In that case, you apply for a TA-ship, so you in advance know that and fill out the forms and do the job. So I've not had any semester that I was not funded. And I think that's the case with most of the PhD students. They're always funded either through research assistantship or teaching assistantship.
Thank you. Natalia had another question, or she has a lot of questions. I'm going to answer some of them, but one is she wants to know the difference between a master's and a PhD. So I don't know if any of you have come in and got your master's and then PhD, if y'all could answer that.
Okay, I could answer that. So I know when I came in, so I came in directly from undergrad to the PhD program. And I remember during the orientation, they were saying like, oh, there's the PhD, but then with respect to masters, there's a thesis masters and the non-thesis masters. And when it comes to computer science, they kind of advise people to go with the non-thesis masters, but I do know some students who did like the thesis masters. With the differences, just like you would do research versus just focusing on courses. And so for me, I was just doing the PhD, and along the way, I decided to get my master's along the way, because initially I started with the PhD in computer science. And so I'd already taken some computer science PhD courses, some of the core courses. And then later on, I switched to human-centered computing, which has a different set of core courses. So then what I found out was after taking some courses for like 3 years or so, I was eligible to get a master's on the way. So then I just like got a master's on the way along, but without, it was a non-thesis master. So I didn't need to write any thesis, but yeah.
So yeah, so I guess the main difference is the main difference is masters are usually like 2-year degrees, so a lot shorter. And again, with the thesis and course-based masters, I've seen students do both. It really depends if you're leaning more towards going to the research field or more into industry, or just kind of having more education to kind of supplement your job. I've seen students who have taken the thesis option, and some of them just eventually go on to the PhD program, right? Others just take the courses, and now that they've enhanced their knowledge, go right back into the job field. So it depends on your individual kind of circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, one point that I was clearly pointed out that if you're not into research, then you can still do masters and not be, not dig your hands into research, and you can still get masters. But in PhD, you definitely have to do research. In masters, that's a choice, and masters is more course oriented compared to PhD, where PhD you have to do research, and that's like a integral part and like an important part of your program. While in masters, that's optional and not required. That's up to you.
Thank you. She also asked if the requirements were the same for both programs. Yes, it is for the master's and PhD, just the deadline is different. She also wanted to know pros and cons of the master's and pros and cons of the PhD program.
I think sorry.
You can go ahead.
Yeah, I think Isaac did put it in a, like, it did answer some part of that question already. It's more dependent on like what you want to do. So I do feel like if you want to just gain a little bit more knowledge, you don't want to go into research, then like getting the master's I think is better, because a lot of companies I know, for example, like maybe like Facebook, for example, you get maybe like a higher IC level, which is like your level when you enter the company with a master's or a PhD. So it's not like you have a PhD and you have a higher level, but master's doesn't. Master's or PhD has a higher level. So in that case, if you're not really interested in research, then spending the extra 4, 5, 6 years to do the same thing you could have done with a master's may not be the best way to go. You may just want to just do a master's and be able to like have that edge, competitive edge over others when you're applying to a job. But if you're interested in research and you think, for example, like maybe I want to teach someday, maybe I want to go into academia, or maybe I just love research, I want to learn more and I want to produce my own ideas, I want to contribute to the field, I want to challenge myself, and I want to see like what I can do, or can I do this, or I just want to challenge myself, then maybe the PhD is for you. So the pros and the cons, I think it will just depend on for me, it depends on the individual, what your future goals are.
That's great. Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, I think she covered it perfectly, honestly.
So then she was also asking about funding. So she was asking, was it hard getting funding? And if you get admitted into our PhD program, their funding would be available to you. There's different fundings available. We have the Graduate School Preeminence Award, we have TAs, we have research assistants. So it just depends on what you come in as far as funding goes. Let's see, we also have, what was the most surprising thing that you discovered about graduate school life?
I have one. The biggest thing I think is something that they don't tell you typically. Well, yeah, obviously that's why it's surprising. But you are always thinking about research, right? It's not like a normal 9-to-5 job where you clock in, you clock out, you go home, you just throw back, forget about everything, and just like completely de-stress and chill. Unfortunately, that is not the case. You're always thinking about kind of your next step that you're taking. You're always looking out for things to kind of inspire your research, right? You're always thinking about kind of what to do, even if it's not necessarily like I'm stressing about a deadline, right? I'm still constantly thinking that around the clock what I'm going to be doing. And so that's, it makes it really difficult to kind of relax, but it's definitely something to watch out for. And it's really intellectually rewarding, but it does come with that kind of right added stress and anxiety at that point.
I think for me, like the one thing they don't tell you is how much your efforts does not necessarily mean positive results. So when you're taking an exam or you're really studying for a test in undergrad, like if I put enough effort, if I read, I should pass the exams. But when it comes to like the PhD, I could have sleepless nights. I could put all the effort life has to offer and write this beautiful paper. And I think it is so great. And then I submit it to a conference and like someone just rips it apart, like not even caring about my feelings at all. So I think no one really tells you the amount of times you get rejected, like rejections, which can be really mentally taxing after some time, like saying all the rejections. But all I can say is in the long run, it's part of the process. I guess it makes you a bit more resilient. If you have a career, you know that like failure doesn't really define who you are. So just like the amount of times you can fail in grad school, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and the silver lining is that it doesn't matter if you fail, you can always work hard and fix it. So don't get discouraged.
Yeah, I've heard it said, right, undergrad teaches you how to succeed, grad school teaches you how to fail gracefully.
So Natalia also had a question, and she wants to know why you chose PhD over a master's.
The research. Full stop. Like I never considered the master's really as an option because that's not why I wanted to keep going with school. I wanted to be able to give to the field. And the only way I really saw that as being an option was to get involved in research and add my own ideas and projects to that and just get more involved in the community in a way that you don't really get to do with only a master's or a bachelor's. There's a certain level of extra openness to getting to fail as a PhD and getting to try those things that haven't been done before and getting to set those new lines.
Yeah, for me, I think master's is usually 2 years. Sometimes it's shorter than that for other people. I feel like master's is kind of rushed. For me personally, other people might not feel that, but I feel like working over 5 years, a time where you're not stressed about courses, but you're doing what you want to, and you're getting paid for that. So I think that works best for me. I feel like master's is too stressed, and then you have to run quickly and finish your 2 years, finish your courses, and go get a job and do internship. Just too rushed. I like PhD because I'm still studying. I'll still get masters on the way. I'm funded. I don't have to worry about how I pay my tuitions. And at the same time, I do study and I do research in the field that I want to, and I can actually make a difference and be noticed in my academia published papers. Like I think that is what made me choose PhD.
So for me, I feel like doing the PhD opens a lot more path for you. Like, so with the PhD, after like spending like 4 or 5 years, if you want to be a software developer, good. if you want to be a data scientist, you can still squeeze your way there. If you want to be a UX researcher, you can do that. So like it just opens a lot of, and then if you want to be a professor, so it just opens this path, especially if you're not really sure what you want to do, and you're like saying, oh, maybe I want to, I love research, or maybe I want to do this, I want to do that. And the PhD, I do feel like just gives me that opportunity where like when I finish, like the amount of maybe job opportunities open to me is like really endless. And it just gives you that more competitive edge also over others.
And also, if you're planning to be in have an academic career, like you want to be a professor somewhere, you want to be a lecturer, PhD is like to go for that.
Okay, so Aisha talked about this a little bit. Have you had any setbacks? And if so, can you talk about them and how you overcame them?
Okay, I could go first. So like setbacks, I feel like the PhD and setbacks kind of go all hand in hand. Like, I don't think there's any PhD students you're ever going to find who was like, oh, my PhD was so smooth sailing. Like, I would really want to meet that PhD student. Like for me, I feel like my biggest setback was like, till now, I've been trying to publish a paper for 4 years now. Yeah, it's been 4 years. I'm trying to publish the same paper, and it's not, I feel like it's just in the long run, there may not be like an exact way to like overcome that. Like in the long run, I can't force people to accept my paper, but there are like options you have that you can do. Like once I'm trying to graduate, I could say, okay, maybe I don't try to aim for top tier conferences anymore, like 25% acceptance. Maybe I'll just go for 50% acceptance and just accept that it was published anyways. Or I could just say like, oh, maybe I would just like move on from that research. So what I did to overcome it was I kind of moved away from that research, and it helped me to kind of refocus myself on like what my dissertation research should really be about, like move. So it just depends. Like to me, there's no maybe one solution, but along the way you figure something out. And with the help of your advisors, your colleagues, there are a lot of like resources you get as a grad student that you can like use to your advantage, and they would help you like tell you like, okay, why not think of this, why not think of that, and then you can then solve most of the problems you experience in grad school.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh, it's so true. Especially with the right, having you're always going to get your paper rejected. And it's always a constant process of right, learning from kind of your mistakes and really internalizing that and kind of right, iteratively moving towards right, something better. Like for example, I had worked up, gosh, there was like a month where I was just working nonstop to get this paper out and ended up getting rejected. And well, a couple years down the line, we kept continually making improvements and refinements, revising the paper, submitting it, getting more comments back until finally it got accepted. And so it's really is continual process that you just have to keep hammering at it. And it's, I mean, it's life. So what can you really do?
Okay, so Adam has a question. He wants to know how being a graduate student, what it's been like for you guys during COVID.
Okay, at least for me. All right. So during COVID, so I think it depends. Like for me, I feel like I've had some successes during COVID. So like I defended my proposal, which is like a big milestone. And I did that all through during COVID. I also had my internship at Facebook during COVID. So I do think I did have the eyes. But aside from that, just being at home is like, has been mentally draining nowadays. Like actually now, right now, I feel like it's the 9th month or so or something being at home, and it's hard to, you know, just want to do work. At this point, it's really hard. Like I feel so sleepy all through the day, and like I have things I need to do because I need to graduate. So, but it's still the same setting priorities, and also knowing that like it's okay. Like it's really okay to have those moments where like you can't do anything, you're anxious, you're mentally drained. You're not the only one feeling the same. Almost every PhD student is going through that. So if you stress about that, you're only going to make it worse. So I do feel for me, it's just the time when like I get those days where I'm so motivated, then I do as much work as I could when I'm motivated. And if I don't feel as motivated, it's okay. I may just sleep because like, yeah. So that's me.
It's a lot of it, I think for me, it's been figuring out that maintaining priority and energy level while being at home. Especially with, at least in my lab, the different projects are so, they're so divergent between the different PhD students. And the way our lab was kind of structured was anytime like we were having a lull in motivation on our project, or we were really stuck on something, like we would just like kind of watch over each other's shoulders on like the other projects going on, even if they were totally unrelated, just to kind of see what was going on, like keep up like to speed with each other, like a little bit more of a sense of community. And like we know that everyone else is going through the same kind of ups and downs of motivation and energy, and like being productive in research, or also you've been fighting a bug forever and there's no one really around that you can talk to regularly on it, like out of the blue. It has to be structured time now. So I think the lack of a like always available community has been a little extra draining on the productivity, and just getting that extra breadth of topics, even though like you're not studying them, like getting to look at everyone else's work and run into each other in the hallways. Hey, how's your paper going? How's the project? Did that proposal get accepted? Like you feel a lot more isolated than normal, and you were already kind of isolated before by being a PhD student.
Yeah, those are probably some of the biggest points. One thing I'd like to add just for our lab, what kind of worked is we ended up just kind of everyone being on Zoom for like hours at a time, even just not talking, just working, to partially simulate, right, that kind of feeling of everyone's working together, and if you need something, just be like, hey, I need something. And it's definitely helped, especially trying to keep on focus, right? Because if you're like actively as part of a Zoom conversation, you're not like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna roll over right now into bed and go to sleep, or yeah, you know what, let's play some video games, right? It keeps you unfocused, and it definitely helps with some of that. But overall, it's been a really hard time trying to adjust, but we have to make do.
Thanks, Isaac. That's great. I have a quick question. I don't know, with all of you, the four of you PhD students, are all of your undergraduate degrees in computer science, or are they different degrees?
Mine is computer science.
Yeah, computer science.
Mine is also computer science.
Technically computer science.
That's
I was
You have to elaborate now.
Science, so.
Yeah. Okay, well, that answers that question. Okay, so Natalia had another question. She wants to know, has your definition of success changed? Great question, Natalia.
Yeah, at least for me, I feel like it has changed a lot. Like in undergrad, my definition of success was getting A's on my courses. Yeah, like if I get an A in a course, I did well. But now in grad school, my definition of success at the beginning was getting a paper accepted. But now getting a paper accepted, yes, it's still success, but just finishing a paper, I do think I've started measuring that as success now. Like being able to at least have a full draft of a paper ready within like ready for a deadline, to me is success. Because then whether it gets accepted or not, I just need to be revising that paper. So for me now, it's like being able to do that, but at the same time also passing my milestones, because in the PhD, there's the qualifying exams, then there's the proposal, and then there's the final dissertation. So like finishing those milestones is like the greatest part of success, I think, also for like as a PhD student. So yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like even smaller milestones. Like for my project, because there wasn't a foundation of literature review for the project that I had inherited. I actually ended up doing my qualifier based around the lack of a literature review that we needed. So I haven't even gotten to just like defining success by a paper. For me, it was something even smaller. It's like getting a collaborator on board with our project that was outside of our field was a big moment for me to just see that success wasn't grades or publications. It was having a direction and like a direct line to seeing like the impact that was going to happen. And like you can even scale that down a little bit. It's like instead of focusing, did I get an A on the course? Did I get 100 on the test? It's, did I understand the information? Did I learn it? Am I actually able to like use it with something now? I don't care what the grade that I get out of it. I mean, it'll sting a little bit, like if I don't pass the class, but all I care about is, did I learn the information? Is it something usable to me now? Because if I've gotten to that point, to me, that's success, whether there's a number associated with it or not.
That's great. Anybody else want to chime in?
That pretty much covers most of it. It's changed from being these kind of objective measures like A, right, B, to really something subjective. And I think how I measure it these days is, right, it's almost, did I learn something, right? If I learned something, that was a win, right? Even if my paper got rejected, if I learned something, right, then, well, I've grown as an individual, I've grown as a researcher, now I know what to do right next. And so that's kind of what success is for me now.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you found your research topic?
Okay. For me, that was a little bit easier. I was kind of interested in sort of the gesture recognition side of things right from the get-go. And that's sort of how I found my advisor to begin with. And from then, I mean, I was put on a grant that did gesture recognition, and then kind of moved into how we can make computers like little virtual characters that can understand some of these gestures. And so it's just kind of expanded and branched off from there. I don't know if anyone else has any.
My experience was entirely different. So I came from undergrad, and I initially when to choose an advisor, not topic, the advisor first of all, because being an undergrad, I didn't know what what research actually was, or like how deep or what topic do we actually investigate when we research in that area that we know broadly as an undergrad. So I chose started to go with a course topic that I was interested in as an undergrad, and I chose a professor that was teaching that course and was doing research probably within it. But when I went into that lab and I did actually see what the research was, it was very different and unfamiliar, nothing that I would have expected or like even thought of remotely. It was like very far away from my imagination, and I couldn't relate to it. Still, I tried to work on it, thinking that maybe research work is different, and I'll get a hold of it as I continue. But even after a semester, I was feeling very remote and like not connected to the topic. So I started while I was already into the PhD, first year of my PhD, I started looking for other professors, and I did talk to my own professor who was my advisor at that time, and they also suggested that if you do not feel very comfortable with your current topic or what projects that I have, you can always look into other professors and talk to them. So I did a search within the department, or when I was in the department, and I did come across a few professors, and I did communicated to them over email and met few of them, and then I came to meet my professor, who's my current advisor, and then I felt more related to the research that she was doing, and then I joined her lab, and then within that I chose my topic that was aligned to what they were doing and what I was interested within that in that area. Also, that area was broad enough, and the professor allowed me like I had the option to totally work on the topic or research on the topic that I was interested in. And now that I knew what actually research topic means, because it can be very broad and it can be very narrow, and you really don't know when you're outside. So after coming into the lab and understanding, okay, what what area basically means and what research topic could be. I understood that, and then I like by that time I was already in a project. I understood few things, and based on that, I like made a choice on what I like, what I know, and what I understand, and what I think was a more promising area of research, and I started working on that.
So for me, like after I joined my advisor's lab, so in our lab, when you join, you choose like about 2 to 3 projects you're interested in, like 2 projects especially that you're interested in. And so looking through what my advisor was doing, I chose 2 projects that I felt matched my interest. And so while working on those 2 projects simultaneously, I kind of liked the movement-based games one I was doing. And so I was doing more of that, but like I said, the paper got rejected for a long time. And so just that rejection kind of became like a positive thing at the end, because it made me focus on the other project instead, which I had submitted papers on that one and the papers got accepted. So like I could form a story from that, and I had ideas as to like how to like focus on like, okay, understanding like how to do gesture recognition for children and things like that. So I felt like thinking about it was to do a dissertation on that. I could form a story easily that using that route. But then if I'd focused on like the game one, which I was originally interested in, then it'll take a lot more to like get that to work. So then that helped me to like know what I really wanted to do, and then I switch like topics or like focus on a different topic. Yeah.
Yeah, I started off with like this kind of tunnel vision attraction to physical simulation work, which is kind of how I got into Surf Lab with Dr. Peters. And then from there, he did the same kind of thing. He put me on a couple different projects, one that was already being kind of spearheaded by another PhD student in the lab that I was just kind of helping along with over the summer. And like, as I got more established with that, he's like, well, we've got this other project that has kind of been off to the side for a couple months. It's been picked up and dropped by students for the past like 2.5 years or so. Take a look at it, see if you can get it up and running again, and see if it interests you. So like I juggled those 2 projects for a little bit, still thinking that I really want to do like fluid simulation, like snow simulation, fog and stuff like that. But the more and more I got into the medical reconstruction project with the VR and seeing the impact that it had on just interpreting data and visualizing things, I started to realize that like the power of that I was so like enamored with when it came to physical simulations didn't have to be something that was animated or being used to like demonstrate like a natural phenomenon. That you could get that same kind of edge in communication with something that was static just by changing the viewing modality. And I'm like, okay, so maybe I was a little too like pinhole focused on this. Let me kind of like spread out a little bit, see like the different ways that visualization and simulations have kind of like cropped up over the years into like different forms, and which one of those kind of subsets was I more interested in. So I ended up leaving the surgical simulation project and just focusing purely on the medical reconstruction in VR. So it really depends, like kind of widen and narrow your field for what you're interested in until you find one that kind of gets you directed into that one kind of channel that you really kind of mesh with.
Thank you guys, that was awesome. So I have another question. When did you know you'd made it, and were you where you wanted to be?
I feel like I always knew like at least I will graduate. So I don't know if there's like an exact point I knew I made it, but if there's an exact point when I felt like, okay, I know I will get this PhD, was in April after I defended my proposal. Yeah, I think for me, that was when I started being like, okay, now I felt like I could, how do I put it? I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. Is that like I tell my advisor, like prior to my proposal, of course, my research was going well. I was publishing, but I felt like if you don't propose, you're not a PhD candidate, and you don't really know when you're going to finish your PhD program. But when for the proposal, you have to make a timeline. And even if you don't stick to that timeline, you know that maybe it will be plus, like maybe plus 2 semesters, plus 1 semester, or it could be exactly that. But so doing that proposal kind of just made me feel like, okay, now I kind of have that structure towards like saying exactly how I will finish this program. So for me, that was when.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's a hard process, right? So it's really hard to quantify where you are from point A to point B. But that's definitely where the milestones come in, right? Like you can be like, oh, I finished all my classes. Cool, there we go. That's a step forward, right? Or I passed my qualifying exam. There we go. There's another thing that you can look back on, or I defended my proposal, right? And all the way through. You kind of just have to, right, bunker down and just know that, okay, I'm somewhere, but I'm somewhere here along this line, and I know at least where I'm going, and I can make steps towards that.
Yeah, so I haven't gotten through many of the milestones yet because I've been teaching so much. I just submitted my qualifier 2 days ago. Very exciting. So I don't know if I've really gotten to the point where like I can say I feel like I've made it, but I've definitely had that moment of I know I'm in the right place by working on that qualifier. And oddly enough, thanks to COVID, I was actually able to attend SIGGRAPH this year. And through that, I was actually able to meet one of the authors for a couple of papers that I was reviewing at the time without realizing it. And we'd been going back and forth because we were both watching a panel live, and we were kind of going back and forth about how that panel kind of related to like the research that both of us were working on, but also why we kind of disagreed with the argument they were trying to make. So we just kept talking about it, and then a couple of the other professionals kind of joined in, like sharing like why we thought that VR was going to be like a benefit to the field, or how it was going to help with this, that, and the other thing. And it's like the fact that I was actually able to contribute to that kind of a conversation, and not just be looked at as, oh, you're just a student, you're still learning. Like, yeah, you can talk about the topic, but like there's no motivation behind you. Like it was such an even playing ground when we were talking about it that I'm like, I finally feel like I found the people that I'm going to be peers with, regardless of where they are and what they're doing.
So I have another question. They want to know, what is your favorite programming language?
Go ahead.
I have a least favorite.
What is it? Go ahead, Jennifer, tell us.
So it's a toss-up between C and JavaScript, though I do have an appreciation for JavaScript because there's times where it is very powerful, but it's one of those kind of like love-hate relationships. You love to hate on it, but you also fully acknowledge that it's very powerful in the right place.
So for me, I would say like, I don't know if I'll say it's a favorite, but it's just the language I used the most was Java in undergrad and grad school. And I feel like just knowing Java helped a lot when I needed to use C#, let's say like when I was doing things with Unity and just like for my current project. So, but what I found in grad school is even if you have a favorite programming language, it becomes kind of obscure when you're doing research, because rather than your favorite programming language, you need to think about the programming language that would help you do the work you want to do best. So sometimes I find that like, okay, I want to use C# here because I may use C# in the future, so it will get me to know C# a bit more. Or I may say like, oh, because I'm trying to do something heavily statistical, I may want to use Python, or may want to use R to do stuff. So I feel like regardless, just being comfortable with learning new languages is very important, because you never know what project you'll be thrown into and what language you may need to use to get the job done.
All right, I want to say Python, and Python. It's probably, not only is it like kind of easy to get into and super flexible, but it's also one of the biggest languages for like any sort of machine learning, statistical analysis, graphics visualization, right, in the research field. and it's just it's so like there are no frills, so it's so quick. If you need something, right? If you need a quick script to run something, if you need to write something to help you conduct your experiments, just bam, 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 get them out. And so for those reasons, it's really become one of my favorites, and I'm sure a lot of other researchers can kind of attest to that.
For me, I guess Java is like the one that I've used most in my undergrad, and it just comes with experience that you've worked on it so much that you're just comfortable with it, irrespective of other languages being more useful. So I'm comfortable with Java and Python. I think that's the case with most of the undergrads because those are like the basic languages that are being taught. And as Alicia said, different projects require different programming language. So as long as you're comfortable with one programming language, you can kind of with some effort learn another language and try to use it. That's most important because languages in trend keep changing and you don't know which one would you need. So what's important is to know the basics and so that you can learn a different one if you want to.
Yeah, I'm slowly boarding the Python train. I've gotten a lot more familiar with it in the past semester or so. For automating things, absolutely my favorite thing. A script in Python will save days and days of work, even though you could have just started it with like a 10-minute task. It's like, but in the long run, it should really be a script. And I'm slowly in that kind of like transition stage. Like, so our project started in C++, and then we realized there were way too many parts going on and too many kind of cooks in the kitchen with the handoffs that were going on with the project. It started in Java, then it went to C++ without really like doing much other than putting the Java syntax into C++. And it's like, okay, it's time to refactor it. We've been like dodging it for a while, and we're finally getting it into C# and Unity, and honestly, very quickly becoming my favorite one because you get that same control from C++, but you don't have to worry nearly as much about things going awry in C++. So you get like that kind of extra security you get from Java too. And I'm like, this is the one thing I needed. And I don't want to give it to anyone else. I want to keep it all for myself. But it's interesting, just like the development of the different languages and realizing when it's better to switch from like something you're comfortable with to something that's new, because that's what's going to facilitate the project the best. And then convincing your advisor that it's worth that extra time to convert a code base that works into a different language is like, but it works, why bother? It's like, it will help make the mundane parts of the research a lot easier. So if you ever find yourself in that argument, that's the line that usually gets them. It's like, oh, okay, so it's going to save you time. I'm like, theoretically, yes.
Thank you guys so much for joining in the panel and taking out. I know being PhD students, you guys are busy, and I do appreciate you answering all these questions. So that is going to conclude this panel. And I hope that you all have a great weekend, and go Gators.